Hi, I'm Piotr Kulczakowicz. Easy last name, hard first name. Only 4 syllables for the last name. I'm director with quantum startup Foundry, working with Julie to have big success within whatever time frame it's going to be. Thank you for joining the panel today. I wanted to emphasize that quantum, especially the way we look at it at Quantum Startup Foundry, is not just quantum computing, right? It's inevitable that we lean towards quantum computing applications, but it's much more. In fact, we had a discussion earlier on with Scott, which of the quantum technologies is going to be taking off to the markets first in a meaningful way. And, we are agreeing that it may be sensing, could be something around atomic clocks and so on. So quantum spans a wide spectrum of technologies, right? And they all face different timing to market and to realization of the full market potential. So good selection of companies in the second panel, and just one quantum computing. We have quantum sensing and anti-quantum, which is, prevention of what quantum computers will be able to do in the future with our secure communication. Inevitably, market will be driven by the applications and their users. I don't think we talked enough about the users of all those quantum technologies. Applications will be enabled by the hardware and corresponding software development and so on. But talent actually may be a dragging factor. And not only talent on the company side, but also on the user side. All right, so with that, let's start with Henning. Arguably, the path to the market is relatively short for your company. And it is now popular knowledge that quantum computing will break any encryption, right? So the question is, when it's going to happen and why now? Why to buy your products now? Why to incorporate your products now? And what is your traction with customers? You mentioned something about German government and so on and so forth. If you could speak to the traction with customers, why now? And why in the US as well?
Yeah, thank you, Piotr. So I want to address maybe the workforce first. So as a startup, we are in a comfortable position that we don't have to maintain these standard big company working schemes. We can bend the rules a little bit. We can give the team that we find a little bit more freedom, like give them space to develop, be creative. And I think we use this as an advantage, really. Of course, it's hard to find these specialists because for what we are doing, basically all of us, we need the best that we can possibly find. That's very clear. But sometimes these people you find by giving them a challenge, they need to challenge that they can really bring all their talent inside, and that is sometimes more important than earning the most money. So why quantum now? It's a good question because there's a lot of discussion going on, obviously, between all the companies. Like, how do we scale this quantum computer? When will this really happen? When will we be able to use it? Now, it's very difficult to say when it's actually going to happen, but it's just a question of time. And we see that scaling this quantum computer will be at a certain point only an engineering task. And we hear this not only, maybe you agree or disagree, but we hear this also from the big companies like IBM. They say basically the same. And we see that a few years ago, like people told us all this stuff will take 10, 15, maybe 20 years, or it will never happen. And now we see the windows really closing and things tightening up.
Any comments from other panelists?
With regards to...
Why now?
Why now? Well, I think generally, again, our our specific product is very different than quantum computing. It is leveraging quantum in a way that is more simple, right? In a way we're not dependent on all this multi-spin coherence issues and the sensitivity, how delicate they are and to maintain, right? For quantum computing, we're leveraging kind of the first bit of it, which is to manipulate with spins and to help make them orient to one direction, make them enhanced for the MRI again. So from our end, now is the time, right? We're able, after 4 years, to bring this to the level that is potentially is very useful for patients, and now is the time for us to take it to product, right? I think, yeah, at the end of the day, I think there will be more and more quantum-based technologies outside of quantum computing and inside quantum computing, right, that would arrive to the market in a staggered approach.
You have ready market, essentially, and a single MRI lab is your potential customer, right?
Correct, yeah.
And thus the question is, given that arguably ready and willing market, in addition to developing your prototype into a commercial product, what other challenges do you see as potential obstacles to deploying your technology?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing a challenge that I think the entire industry of quantum would face at some point, right? Which is, how do you cast this very innovative, completely new concepts of quantum and cast them into very traditional existing frameworks of quality standards, GMP, notified bodies, right? All these very rigid structures that might not be able to digest what the differences, right, and to be flexible enough to take them through that approval process. So in our example, right, it's the FDA. How do you explain the FDA that there is a material with relaxation that doesn't degrade like any other material in pharma, but actually the signal diminishes over time, right? It's a very different concept for the FDA to understand. It requires someone who is not a chemist, right? It requires someone who is a physicist. Does the FDA even have physicists on board? So I think the challenges that we're now facing are going to be very similar for other members of this quantum industry in the future, to really educate regulators, notified bodies, and so on how to approve the use of these devices. Yeah.
On the other hand, something very tangible, like improving MRI diagnostics, right, can create a pathway for the general public to embrace quantum in the name of products, and perhaps will make it easier for other companies, including quantum computing, to be embraced more easily by the general public. We are missing one company from the panel, which is Molecular Quantum Solutions. They couldn't make it to the US due to COVID, interestingly. And they are in the application space. And obviously, with applications, the enabling factor is available hardware. And Yuval talked a little bit about their ability to scale up no matter how many qubits. I would like to turn the conversation towards atom computing. And if you could please speak to the fact how you see the market developing, how important are the applications for what you guys are developing, those substantially capable quantum machines.
Yeah, well, the question of how important are the applications are everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, so...
so how does it play? I mean, the
well, yeah,
chicken and egg problem, right? Or how do you create a virtuous cycle of...
no, I don't think it's chicken and the egg. It's not like we're failing to start. I think we're already on the journey, right? We're just early days. And we need applications, software, infrastructure, software, and hardware, as well as just skills and employees and know-how and experience to all advance at a common, or like at a consistent pace, right? So I would argue that we are in a supply-limited situation right now in the quantum computing space, not a demand-limited. I'm very encouraged by going out and talking to potential end users and software companies that have novel ways of using quantum to solve problems that either haven't been solved before or just aren't that practical to do it on classical computers, that they have many ideas. They want to solve these problems. They want to use quantum computers. They just aren't big enough, dependable enough yet to solve the needs that they have. And so that's why I say I think it's a supply-limited situation. As soon as we get 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, depending on the use case, kind of qubits with error correction, I guarantee you the innovation is just going to spread like wildfire. There's so many good ideas that people come up with on how to use computers today in the classical sense, and they're going to find ways to use the quantum ones in the future. So that's why I say the mission for my company is crystal clear. It's just scalable quantum computing as measured by number of qubits with error correction. If we do that, and people continue to have innovative ideas and the skill sets and the interest of employees to kind of come into the ecosystem continue at the pace that they've already started at, I think we're going to be creating something really big.
Do we have any comments or questions from the audience at this time? All right. In Quantum Startup Foundry, we have talked to about 50, 60 companies at this stage. We talk to everyone who registers with us, whether it's a single person with a vague idea or a company with substantial investment with products and sales. And if there is one theme, and I think a previous panel touched upon that as well, it's the availability of talent. And I think conversation so far was focused on talent as in, building those machines, building those solutions on the supply end. But I'm curious about perspective of the panelists on the user side of things, right? I mean, you were talking about the need expressed by your clients and potential clients for better, faster, bigger machines, whatever. But the question is, who's going to use those capabilities in the organizations? On the user side, who is going to be the champions, early champions of those technologies? And that applies to all of you, right? Whether it's quantum computer or whether it's a new imaging machine, right? There is the question: how do you develop the user side of things, the people who are going to be champions in the organizations to use your technology? I'm curious about your perspective, and also curious about the perspective on that aspect of the talent hunt from the audience.
Yeah.
Who's gonna take on the tough question?
I think it starts with the champions. There has to be a mixture of people in the organization, right? It has to be someone on the application side in your end, right? In our end is the clinician, right? Maybe I'll just use an example from our world, right? So there has to be a technical champion, a scientist, an MRI scientist who's well immersed in the instrumentation and the advanced use of MRI machines, right? It has to be someone beyond the typical MRI technician, right? And way beyond. And then this needs to be.
But let's stop here for a second. You're a medical doctor by training, right? Am I correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what kind of education do you see, people studying at medical schools today receive in terms of not just diagnostics, but like new frontiers of diagnostics?
Very interesting. First of all, I graduated quite a while back, so
right.
It's difficult for me to say. But
these are your future customers, right?
Yeah. So again, that's why it cannot be one person, right? I don't think one single person really encompasses all the skills and capabilities you'll need to operate in this new era of quantum, not quantum computers and not quantum enhancers for MRI. So I think it has to be a combination of very strong, savvy scientists / engineers, right, who would operate the machinery, and then the users themselves, the end customers, right, the people who would actually develop the applications for that. Again, on our end, it's the MRI scientist on the one hand, and the clinician on the other hand. So the oncologist, the urologist, the breast cancer oncologist, right? They would develop the application, as it's clear, right? People know how to develop applications. That's where that new innovation meets the experience, and that's this kind of collaboration is what is essential to bring new technologies into real use and impact. Right? And I don't think it's going to be different in your world, right? It's probably going to be very much similar, right, when you bring new technology.
I would just give a personal example, like, it has nothing to do with quantum, but just data analytics, right? Usually the way my experience is you have an executive sponsor who's like a business unit person who has a need. Like at Intel, I ran the server processor product line, like I mentioned, and I had a $2 billion annual R&D budget, and I had many, many projects that I was investing in. And I needed to figure out what's my optimum way to allocate my R&D budget across many candidate silicon projects that we could go do, right, in a period of time. And then I had a mathematician and a data science team that were just looking to do cool projects, right? They had tools and methodologies and how to do data science. And I had a need, and you just come together and say, okay, you guys have a know-how, I have a need, let's sponsor a project, and then we'll figure out how to get value out of it, and we'll iterate, and it'll just grow into something big, right? And I think it's gonna be the same thing with quantum. You're gonna have business unit people with executive sponsors who have a budget and can afford to allocate some of that to a new way, and you're gonna have people that understand how to program quantum systems. They'll come together and they'll figure it out as they go. I don't think it'll be any different than the past.
So Henning, you've mentioned a client or customer being a healthcare system, if I got it right.
Yes.
So could you please speak to your experience with how your technology is in a way embraced by the organization, how it worked on a practical level?
Yeah, in the healthcare business, we have patient records that have a very long lifespan. So typically somewhere between, I don't know, around about 80 years or something. So these need to be protected very well. And that is not an easy task because over their lifespan, you have to move them between different systems, between different encryption and whatever you need to do. You need to do a lot of things with this data. And these companies are aware that they have a responsibility that goes beyond like a business benefit that they can gain from that. So they just have to do it because it is imminent that someone will try to break these systems especially in healthcare and finance. So there's targets, obviously, that are more attractive. And even if I wish it would be different, we see also this demand in government, state-sponsored actors that are around the world that are preparing themselves to use quantum computers to attack networks and intellectual property. This is inevitable. You cannot avoid it. You have to be prepared for this. And people start to understand that this will happen in the next time, and you just have to be prepared. Otherwise, you stand with your pants down, and that would be really bad.
I mean, if you can share, I mean, in this particular case and this project, I mean, who was the driving force be on the client organization side to drive collaboration with you and test those solutions?
Yeah, the driving force is actually the C-level management. So they understand that they need to do something. They like the idea to be early adopter because they have to be somehow to protect this healthcare records is their duty. They have to do it, and they're responsible for that. And so the management actually knows that they anyway have to do it. They talk to big companies, and they didn't succeed. They couldn't find someone to deliver technologies like this today, and they want to use it today, and it's not available. So this was their motivation to say, okay, we give a startup a chance, and usually, you know, in healthcare, things have to be certified, and you know, like the government's very picky about that, and you have this HIPAA system. We have in Europe, we have other systems, but it's always the same. The certification process is for a startup. It's very difficult to fulfill because it takes months and it costs a lot of money and resources. So these people in the healthcare organization, in the management, they decided to give us a chance, and they get more and more excited about this. So once we started to deploy our technology and they see that they could essentially extend the lifespan of their very expensive medical machines, and for basically for years and save a lot of money with this. And then it got more into the business side instead of sponsoring a small startup. And so this is how we made our way into this healthcare business. And the good thing with healthcare business is once you're in, you're in. Mm-hmm. So these people talk to each other. Everyone in the industry is connected. They meet each other frequently and they say, okay, what have you got? What are you doing about protecting your healthcare records? And this is our way into the industry, right?
So it's fair to say that this was driven at the highest level, and it was a strategic decision.
Yeah,
there is risks, and we have to address them. And
the administrators of the IT stuff, they really don't have time to take care of this and to establish these systems, and they would fail because someone has to sponsor it from the business side.
All right. So switching back to MRI, and I'm curious about when you are selling your solution. I mean, perhaps or preparing to sell the solution right now. I mean, what are the reactions? I mean, the value proposition is relatively clear here, but there is uncertainty related to the novelty of the technology. You're still in a prototyping stage and so on. Could you speak to how the customers perceive this, improved but novel and, carrying some risk technology?
Sure. So I think luckily for us, we're building on a somewhat an existing paradigm. The idea of doing metabolic imaging with MRI has always been this holy grail, something that is very difficult to obtain because of this, how difficult it is to create hyperpolarization, that enhancement of molecules. This is very difficult. In classical physics, it takes more than 2 hours in less than minus 450 Fahrenheit to create that level of polarization. It's a very brute force, very kind of archaic process. So the notion that this is potentially possible is out there. And MRI scientists in tier 1 centers, the Sloan Ketterings of the world, UCSF, MD Anderson, these guys are aware of these technologies. They're even employing these technologies in their traditional manner. And I think when we came to them, we told them we will do this in less than 2 minutes in room temperature by leveraging quantum, right? Because that's the biggest difference, right? It's like doing classical physics, it takes 2 hours and it's in millikelvin temperatures. And with quantum, it's done in room temperature in less than 2 minutes. So I think the notion that this can be done, right? And that we're leveraging new technologies to do that was very well accepted by these centers who are already aware of the potential impact. I think what we're seeing right now is the next cycle of hospitals who were once not aware of this potential, and now are being exposed to it through our for presentations and through our kind of exposure to the greater clinical community. And I think the reaction there is also very positive because suddenly people who are doing MRIs for different use cases and they see the unmet need. I mean, they are the people who actually see the unmet need. They are these are the clinicians that have this open question: is it aggressive or not? Should we take it or not? Yeah, did it react to our ablation or did it not? So they're seeing the unmet needs, they're feeling the pain of themselves as clinicians and of the patients, and I think they understand that this another layer of information that they would get from these quantum-enhanced materials would be significant for them. So we're now seeing that second level of enthusiasm from new users. And I think it's like in any other technology, when it comes to the market, there's a lot of hype. And of course, naturally, we'll not be able to support and help in every type of indication, but we'll definitely find those use cases where this brings significant value to patients. Yeah.
So I'm going to turn to atom computing with the toughest question in this chapter of the panel. What can quantum computing company do to create champions at your customers, at your potential customers?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess my first blush answer is I'm not sure it's our job as a quantum computing hardware platform.
It's not.
To create quantum.
But what can you do to help
users? But I can tell you that we are quantum champions or quantum superfans at Atom Computing, and I think that we're really devoted to helping end customers solve their challenges. And as you go out and meet people and you introduce them to the people that are as, in our company, that are as obsessed with quantum as they are and solving their problems, that we connect and it becomes an opportunity for us to collaborate together. And so it's finding those like-minded people that are as obsessed as we are.
That's a great approach. What about other panelists? Do you have any ideas on how you can help spread the gospel of quantum?
That's beautiful. Yeah, again, I think it all starts with unmet needs, right? With pain, right? It all starts with pain. Places where, it starts with pain, then it goes into opportunities, right? First of all, you have to find people with a problem. Later on, we can, like Worley said, we'll think about new opportunities that we can't even imagine right now. So I think finding champions starts with finding people with a problem, right? Again, in our end, it's clinical questions that are left open. It's it's 2 million men with having to go through 12 biopsies every year, right? So that's kind of these are really troubling issues that need a solution. I think creating champions is really by identifying the people with pain and addressing them with a new solution. Yeah.
Any comments?
Well, we're defending against quantum computers, so it's not an easy task. But
that don't exist yet, right?
Yeah.
Or at least cannot
The boogie.
fulfill the promise of the boogie.
We don't know, so
There you go.
and I'm not paranoid, so to help customers embrace this technology, and I am personally advocating to actually use quantum computers in a positive sense. So especially in the healthcare sector, or at least in the research that is coming in the healthcare, the companies are really doing a great job. They are building corporations. They cooperate with Google, with IBM, with all the players, and say, okay, we need to learn and understand how we can benefit, how we can create new medicine and stuff like that, how we can fight climate change, and that is a great thing, I think. And I'm advocating for that. I really love it, and we help to, like in my field, it's more difficult to create these champions, but making them sleep well at night while they feel prepared for the future that is anyway coming, and they don't need to worry about it. This is a good thing. When I made this, then I'm happy.
Any comments or questions from the audience at this time? I mean, whose main responsibility it is to, everybody, you open a newspaper and there will be quantum in the newspaper, right? So there is a general level of awareness that is already, we are soaked with it. But within the organization, whose responsibility is to help create those champions within corporations, organizations to embrace the technology, to invest in experimentation and in testing some of the possibilities? I think you had a question or a comment. Hang on a second, wait for Mike.
I had a question before you started asking your question, so I don't have an answer for you.
All right.
Is it
Okay, go
if
ahead
I
with the
ask you a
question.
I was wondering for the panelists, one of the things that Worley brought up this morning was, regulatory fears and export-imports. And I was wondering how you all are thinking about, long-term, what your approach is for supply chain and regulatory affairs.
I'll start. I think it's something that you do have to think about because it's real, right? Coming from the classical computing world, we've always had export control restrictions on certain kind of thresholds and flops and other ways you can measure performance. I think it'll be the same. It already is the same in quantum, but it'll continue to be. Generally, those thresholds continue to go up over time, just as technology matures, Moore's law, whatever. So I think you have to be conscious of it. I think probably most people in this room, I would guess, are kind of free market type people and would prefer to have less regulation and let the market compete for technology and evolution. I agree with that. But other than just kind of being aware of it, I think there's still a lot of markets where you can do business, both acquiring technology as well as selling technology. Clearly NATO countries, Israel, Japan, Korea, these are all generally friendly countries among each other, and it's not much of a problem. So I think for the near term, that world is big enough that we've got a large market and probably isn't a big, limiter to commerce. But in the long term, if we start putting walls in place between countries or continents, it's going to be a big problem because it's going to lead to redundant technology development. It's going to lead to limited markets and reduced profitability, which will ultimately hit the rest of the economy, the workers, and so forth. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I can just say for the crypto part, it's probably more difficult because crypto is usually classified as dual use anyway. So we applied for an export license with the German government, and we got a response, what the hell are you talking about? Because they don't know what that is. So right now we think that, I agree to you, like we're anyway focused on from a market perspective, focused on the NATO countries. And within the NATO countries, that should be possible. And we estimate that it will stay possible also to do business with all the NATO member states. We are not going beyond that anyway. In cyber, you have to take care of your credibility, and you cannot do business with certain countries if you want to do business here in the US anyway. So I think to stay within the NATO member state area, roughly, that would be the goal for long term even.
We have another question or comment. And would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm David Hopper from the MITRE Corporation. I just had one question about, I'm sure you're all familiar with the challenges with developing this hardware and technology, but what opportunities do you see where you have teams of engineers and scientists that can do great R&D, and you're talking to customers? Are there avenues to generate new knowledge, make innovations from that aspect?
I agree with you. I think your premise, which is you need innovation at all layers of the stack, right? Generally, you've got the physicists and the engineers building the hardware. You've got the software developers, some of which might be kind of low-level hardware, but some might be upper-level APIs, programming languages, SDKs. Those generally are not all in one company. They can be, but they're often partnerships. And then you've got companies that are going to develop applications on top of that, consulting companies that are going to go engage end users to develop potentially proprietary applications. And then, I think everyone needs to collaborate. And the more we have open APIs, open source tools, SDKs, common ways of programming these things, the faster everybody can go, and the more it creates kind of a flywheel of innovation.
One comment I have on the talent. One day we received the registration, and the registration was from a third quantum computing high school club in the nation. I talked to this guy, and there's hope that next generations will be catching up on those new technologies like they did with phones and everything else. I want to switch gears a little bit, continuing talking about the talent. We were talking about the user side, the early adopters, the champions, what have you. But what about quantum business talent, right? And the segue to this question is, I recently had a conversation. Actually, there's a program at Cambridge, I think, that is geared towards developing a quantum business talent. So, a couple of steps away from the hardware, from software. We're talking marketing people, sales people, how you organize a corporation that is doing quantum business, right? So I had a conversation recently with a professor at the business school, and I asked him, hey, what's happening in the business school? I mean, are you guys thinking about developing programs for future quantum business talent, if you will, right? So no physics involved, no software involved. And the answer I got was, it's interesting, but the question is whether we can reach sufficient people to justify something like that at this stage, right? So I'm curious about your perspective. the need for business talent at this stage, where it's still sort of in the product development phase, your future needs and your general perspective on that topic?
I generally think, I feel that, that model of two postdocs going, thinking of an idea in their lab and trying to develop it by themselves, I generally feel this model doesn't work, right? and shouldn't work. And I think that it's really, again, combining two types of talents already in the early stage, bringing those two postdocs with a savvier person on the business side, which is critical to materialize their ideas, right? So I think already in the development stage, it's critical. I mean, I'm pretty sure, Rob, kind of like you had a very similar experience joining Atom, right? As someone with much more business experience, I think it was essential for the company to really take it to the next step. And I'm thinking, how can University of Maryland, for example, can take find those two postdocs with their idea, but not let them kind of take it by themselves forward, right? Because I get so many phone calls from, again, I'm using this two postdocs example. People, with a great idea, they have something, they have no idea how to pitch it. They have no idea how to, build the business case, to explain the unmet need, and so on. And I think that not necessarily it's probably a good idea, right? Or there are many good ideas out there, and I think the business talent needs with appetite for technology, appetite for this more abstract concepts of quantum needs to be there to support these two postdocs. That's really on the early stage of technology. Maybe I'll stop here, but again, that's my opinion on the early stage of technology. So I think business talent needs to be integrated very early on. Yeah.
I would say my company was blessed with two amazing postdocs who got us very far. And I'm pleased to join the team and help create some diversity of business and technology. I think the more pressing problem is not just diversity between business and technology, but diversity of like race, gender, cultural background. And I'm just looking around this room, and no offense to any of us, but it's not that diverse, to be honest. And when I came into Atom, it wasn't as diverse as it needs to be. And it's a problem because, like I said earlier, every quantum technology, not just computing, is going to touch everybody on the planet in some way. It really is the next paradigm shift in computing for the next 50 years. And just like everybody has a cell phone and attaches to the cloud, and our products and services need to represent the people of the world that we're addressing, and therefore our workforce needs to also represent that. And so I'm pleased that the first 3 hires I had at Atom personally on my staff were women. But it's not enough, right? We need to bring more women in, we need to bring more minorities in, we need to bring more ethnicity and diversity just in general so that we can create products and services that people love. So I think that's the more pressing problem.
That's a great comment. Henning, do you have any comments on?
Our chief cryptographist is a woman, so we're already into this. We love it. So yeah, of course. We come back to the business side. We made this experience too, like when you have business development and marketing people, they need to understand at least a tiny fraction of all this technology. They need to have a tiny little bit of talent for technology because this quantum market is opening up. It's not really there that you can say, yeah, I'm addressing exactly this point. You have to understand where this is going. You have to have the fantasy, like to imagine, oh, wow, we could also go there. Maybe we can solve that problem. And therefore, these people need really a little bit more knowledge, talent, and understanding of the technology. Otherwise, it will get very difficult because when people start to explain quantum things with common traditional models, that really doesn't work.
I think we're closing on time. I just want to make sure that if there are any other questions or comments from the audience, we address them. And if not, I would like to close with one final question and just a short round, just quick answer. The panel was supposed to be 4 companies. 3 of them were born outside of the United States of America. So the question is, why the US? Short answer.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's very simple, right? Healthcare is biggest in the US. 50% of all the scanners, all the MRI scanners in the world are in the US. So it's kind of a very simple kind of business case question answer.
We were born here.
So what's your perspective on outside of the US then?
An important market, both source of talent, partnership, and customers.
Yeah, interestingly, a lot of development in quantum is actually happening in Europe, but when it comes to funding these young companies, not necessarily startups, then it gets very, very difficult. So to get funding in Europe, they get 4% of the global funding in Europe at all, and that is like nothing. It's very difficult to survive. And of course, this in the US is the biggest and most vibrant market. And on top of that, we have Julie, who promised us we get our hands on quantum computers. So thank you, Julie.
All right, thank you. I want to thank you all for joining us in the panel. And right now we'll have a short program break, and then I encourage you to stay. We're going to have a very cool conversation called Quanta, and led by Ben Solomon, founder of FedTech. Thank you.